So I'll share my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay. Well, we just went back to the agenda, and but looks like we still have a couple of speakers having technical issues with logging in as panelists. Anyhow, so let me talk about the metaverse, which is my favorite topic for now. Brief introducing myself. I'm currently the president-elect of the IEEE, and my other roles includes chair of the IEEE VR and AR Advisory Board, and also the chair of the VR AR Standards Committee, and the secretary of the IEEE Consumer Technology Society Blockchain Standards Committee. With that being said, I just wanted to highlight that I do have a, I would say, long history with the metaverse since many, many years ago. But before I share my opinions, I have to disclaim that the opinions expressed here are just my opinions, and not necessarily the opinions of IEEE or IEEE. So first of all, what is the metaverse? We have a brief history. Many of you have already know that this keyword, the metaverse, started from 1992 in the novel written by the author Neil Stephenson. The book, the name is Snow Crash. But after several decades, last year, 2021, Roblox as a company, they referenced the keyword metaverse in their prospectus and identified several key features of the metaverse: identity, friends, immersive, anywhere, low friction, variety of content, economy, and safety. So all of a sudden, the entire industry or the entire world is talking about the metaverse. But to me, as a veteran in the industry of VR, I have been thinking that what is the key difference between the metaverse and the virtual reality? We have been talking for decades. To me, I think they are almost the same. Nothing new. There's nothing new in the concept of metaverse. So here comes my definition of metaverse. This is a restricted definition, and I have another one I will show later. So the restricted definition of the metaverse, in my humble opinion, is actually the key difference or the missing point, that if we only use the term virtual reality, we are missing an important, most important aspect, which is persistence. So my definition of the metaverse is that metaverse is persistent virtual reality, which means based on persistent virtual worlds, only based on persistent virtual worlds, the digital assets and NFT, whatever you would like to call, will be meaningful and will be probably valuable. But in my opinion, digital assets and NFT, such kind of hot terms, are helpful, but are not necessary, not the fundamental elements of metaverse. So the metaverse is building upon virtual worlds, especially persistent virtual worlds. And of course, in order for the users to interact with the virtual worlds, we need interaction technologies, especially we need comprehensive senses and actions to allow users to interact with those virtual worlds. And I call those brain-machine interface. Brain-machine interface typically is advanced technology to read your brain and use the signal from your brain to control devices. But in a general sense, brain-machine interface is basically could include everything like the virtual reality headsets or other interactive other devices in enabling any kinds of interactions between humans and the machines or humans and the computers. So that's a brief architecture, but based on that, let me explain our road to the metaverse. So in order to talk about the road to the metaverse, first of all, we need to understand what is reality. So reality, in my humble opinion, is the combination of senses and actions and the world. So the world itself alone is not reality. It's not enough. George Berkeley said that to be is to be perceived. That's why the world itself is not the reality you perceived. The combination of the world and your senses and actions is actually the reality you perceived. So if you agree with this definition, we can look into the virtual reality. From that perspective, virtual reality would be the combination of virtual senses and actions plus virtual worlds, which means we have two dimensions to develop better virtual reality. One dimension is to develop better virtual senses and actions, and the other dimension is to develop better virtual worlds. With that being said, we could start thinking about what is the ultimate virtual reality. My definition is that the ultimate virtual reality would be the combination of indistinguishable and comprehensive virtual senses and actions, and also self-consistent and persistent virtual worlds. So let me explain this to you. What is so-called indistinguishable and comprehensive virtual senses and actions? Excuse me. So many people are very optimistic about our ability, our current technology, in terms of creating a very real experience in a virtual world or so. But actually, that is not true. So we are still facing some grand challenges. This is one example. So imagine you are wearing a virtual reality headset, and you are put into a virtual environment, a virtual bar, drinking beers with your friends. Even if we can fake the look, smell, and taste of the beer, we still are far from being able to create the feeling that you will be high, feeling very excited after you drink alcohol. So that's basically a grand challenge. So we are still far from being able to create a real virtual experience. Not to mention that we are actually today is still far from being able to mimic the smell and the taste. But even with, you can imagine that even with very perfect virtual look, virtual smell, and virtual taste, we are still far from being able to mimic the virtual dopamine, the elements that will make you feel high. So why is that? The reason is that we have made some great progress in terms of some signals that our brain receives, such as sight and hearing. But if you look into that, the reason is that we can create the virtual sight and hearing signals with basic elements such as different lights, different frequencies of sound, things like that. Those are building blocks. But for touch, for smell and taste, we don't even know what are the basic elements of them. And even we know about them, given the example that I just gave you, we're still far from creating those experience, like the interactions between your brain, between your consciousness, and alcohol, and something like that. So, which means we have to change the interface where we are working on. Currently, all the hardware, all the devices, wearable devices, are working on the green interface on this diagram between the outer world and your senses, your body senses. But actually, the ultimate solution would be moving the interface, moving the working interface inside between your consciousness and your senses. So that's that would be the ultimate interface that we should where we should work in order to create an indistinguishable and comprehensive virtual senses and actions. So that's why I have been talking about that the next the next breakthrough in virtuality has to come from new findings in neuroscience, brain science, and so on. Another example is swimming experience, which is about how to create self-consistent and persistent virtual worlds. So in virtual worlds, you have seen lots of different virtual worlds. Some are very fine-grained, some are relatively rough. But imagine how you can mimic, how you can fake the experience of swimming. You need to mimic the water. You need to mimic the feeling of putting your body inside the water. So which are very complicated to today's technologies. So this is another grand challenge. We need to be able to create a self-consistent and persistent virtual worlds. There have been some efforts addressing this challenge from different directions. Here are some examples. The very famous Second Life, Minecraft, and Improbable. So all of these examples, they are building virtual worlds with some basic building blocks, so that the virtual world will be running according to its own laws, physical laws, which means it could be it is not only persistent, but of course also be self-consistent. So that's a key to eventually being able to create the swimming experience, which means our virtual world need to consist of building blocks, and those building blocks will interact with each other according to some physical laws, not necessarily the same physical laws in our real world, but some self-consistent virtual physical laws. So that's another direction and another grand challenge. With that being said, this is my prediction of I would say the road to the metaverse. So one direction is to be able to achieve indistinguishable and comprehensive virtual senses and actions. Today, we are already able to achieve read-only brain-machine interface and simple actions, which means if you are wearing some EEG headset, it could read your read rough signals from your brain, and you can just by thinking, you will be able to I would say type in characters and controlling toy cars, things like that. My expectation is that in 2025 or earlier, we would be able to improve the I would say the depth and the of the brain-machine interface signals, so that by reading the signals from your brain, you will be able to do any actions through such kind of brain-machine interface devices. But the most difficult part is to write into your brain. So read-only is not really very difficult, but write is much more difficult. So my expectation is that by 2035 or earlier, 2035 or earlier, we will be able to have read and write brain-machine interface technologies, which means all kinds of senses, your sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste, emotion, things like that. All kinds of senses can be mimicked by using some brain-machine interface writing functions, writing signals into your brain or your consciousness. And the other direction is, like I mentioned, is a self-consistent and persistent virtual worlds. Today, like the examples that I just gave you, will be able to provide building blocks like the virtual bricks and blocks. And along with the development of our computational power and so on, our expectation is that by 2024 or earlier, we will be able to improve the details to down to the virtual dust level. And later, by 2027, we can probably likely improve the details down to the virtual elementary particles level. So that's our expectation, or in other words, our forecast of the technology. But the best way to predict the future is to create it. So we need to do lots of things to make it happen, and we also need to leverage things like standards and other ecosystem tools and collaborations to make it happen. So here's another definition of metaverse, because we are talking about digital transformation, which is the umbrella of today's session. So many people have different understanding of the metaverse. So I think a general definition is that today we have so many vertical industries using different digital technologies for the digital transformation. So it's very reasonable and predictable that along with the advancement of digital transformation in different industries, eventually we will get into a stage of convergence. So the convergence of digital transformation in different vertical industries, eventually the advanced stage of digital transformation will be the long-term vision of I would say our society, our industry, and our world. That is the long-term vision called metaverse. So that's a general definition. So in order to pave the road to the metaverse, there are multiple efforts on the IEEE. I just mentioned a few of them. we have the VR and AR Standards Committee under the Consumer Technology Society. Under that, we have two working groups. One is the VR and AR working group. Under that, we used to have 12 projects, but for now, those we are under a reorganizing effort. So those projects will be revised and revitalized later. And we have another working group. It's called the AR on Mobile Devices Working Group. They are working on the standard 2048.101. And those are about the standards development. Beyond that, we have the VR and the AR advisory board, which is working on things more than just the standards development. And we also have a global initiative on ethics of extended reality. I call that what they are doing is more than technical aspects. They are addressing non-technical aspects like ethics. So those are just some examples of the efforts on the within IEEE, and we definitely have more. For example, today we have another speaker, Roberto Sarraco, who among his many roles, one of his roles is co-chair of the IEEE Digital Reality Initiative, which is also focusing on digital twin and so on. So I'd also like to make some announcements about what we are doing. Some are IEEE efforts, some are non-IEEE efforts or joint efforts. So one is a series of Metaverse landscape and outlook reports. So we're currently working on 3 reports in a row. The first one to be released in May is the Metaverse in the eyes of top experts. So we invited 11 experts all over the world to provide their definition, understanding, and forecast for the Metaverse. And the second one will be the Metaverse landscape and outlook, technology patterns and standards, planned to be released in August. And finally, we are planning the third episode is the Metaverse landscape and outlook, market and investment. It is planned to be released in November. And excuse me, we're also planning launching a new organization called the Open Metaverse Initiative, which will consist of 2 parts. One part we tentatively call that Open Metaverse Federation. It is planned to be an IEEE ISTO program and a 501c6 nonprofit alliance. It will be entity-based and will have its own organizational structure. And another one will be an individual-based Open Metaverse community, which will be a nonprofit, decentralized autonomous organization, DAO. So those 2 organizations working together will be dedicated to the so-called Open Metaverse Initiative. Our goal or our vision is that Metaverse should be the Metaverse effort or the Metaverse development should be open to everybody. We should encourage global open collaborations so people could working together to design, develop, operate, use and benefit from the Metaverse. So that is our plan. So I will keep you posted. And finally, this is my contact information. You could contact me or keep watching my LinkedIn and other social media channels for news regarding the Metaverse and my efforts in the area of Metaverse. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation today. I see some questions in the chat window. Okay, one question is from Tom. The question is, when are we able to write information to the brain? What can be done to let the brain be written to know that this is information from outside and identify the source? Well, I think technically we don't have the we don't have a clear answer for now, but I assume there will be a series of privacy and security technologies to support that, so that while we will be able to allow our brains to be written, we should definitely be safe and without any compromise in terms of our safety and security. So I assume we will need a series of technologies and standards to before we can do that. And of course, some ethical considerations will be needed as well. Another question Tom put in the chat window is how can we avoid even more immersive echo chambers when information can be put directly into the brain? Well, I think that is sort of like a societal question, and that is a good question. Of course, if I understand that correctly, people can choose what kind of immersive environment they want to stay in or live in. But of course, we may have some societal considerations on like if that is really good to the people, if that is really a good thing to the humanity. So such kind of so myself is a strong believer of the so-called life is elsewhere. I think the reality is could be boring, but we could make people more happy or more productive, or more, I would say, with more possibilities by providing positive virtual experiences. But of course, it is also possible for those virtual experiences to have negative consequences. So that's why we will need ethical considerations. We will need standards, and we will also need to work with the rule makers to avoid such kind of risks. I hope I addressed your question. Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's in other words, I think there's some interesting opportunities there to develop responses before there are issues, or at least the beginnings of responses and methodologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.